pixel thick lines to add structure. If we look at square, there at the bottom, they separate elements. Here, structure is given to the tags on the left with these thin lines, and on hunted, we are hunted. We've got those in the nav on the left, 1 pixel thick dashed lines. This is popular. It's a great way to add structure when you're not going to do any drawing. You can just tell the browser, give me, at the bottom of this div, a 1 pixel dashed border of this color, and great. So these are just a bunch of good examples. There's obviously a zillion more, but I picked these out because I think they typify the kinds of things that you should draw inspiration from. I wanted to show you some examples of those. Like I said, subtraction becomes hard at some point. It's hard to remove more stuff without removing the stuff that matters. So really, at some point, what you want to start focusing on is creating a visual hierarchy. You say, what information is important? What information do I need to communicate to my users ahead of the others? And build a hierarchy that helps them get to that information, to help them scan your page, find the information that's useful to them, and then process it. Yeah, one of the problems with programmer interfaces is a lack of visual hierarchy, a lack of contrast, and it ends up being just, it's like speaking in a monotone, your whole website, it's talking in the same voice. So if you're developing a website, you want to provide a little bit of contrast and a little bit of voice. Some things are more important, some things are less. It's okay to make that distinction. And it also doesn't guide my eye around the page. When I just get to a page, I'm going there to do something, if I already know the site. Or maybe I'm going there and I don't know what's on the site. Somebody told me the site is awesome, and I'm just opening it for the first time. And now I'm looking at the site, and I say, what can I do here? So that's scanning, and you want to help those people find what it is that they came to do, or find to discover you. It aids in discoverability of what it is that you provide. So the first thing that's really important when building a visual hierarchy is put your content front and center. That's why you have users. When you look at all these sites, content is really pretty obvious. Even if you look at it for just a second, you can see where the content is. And a good test when you're laying out your own programmer interfaces or your own designs, whatever, is squint. Squint at your screen. It makes everything blurry. If you can still draw that box on your content, when you squint at it, then it's probably okay. The squint test is a great test because it reduces the resolution of everything that you're looking at. So make sure that your content is very obvious. White space, very important. Give your content room to breathe. You can actually do a whole hierarchy of information. You can build a whole architecture just using white space, just giving different elements a little bit of space from each other will help you say, this is different from that, and this is more different from all of those. Even in designs that are less minimal, things that have a lot more content. If you look at the meta information on the right, there's tags and there's this other thing. I guess it's categories. I'm not sure. But it doesn't matter. He's actually split those into two. He could have made them one list, this designer. But this is a good example of how you want to split information up. Just add a little bit of white space between things, and it helps set them off. And of course, it's important to leave a lot of white space all around. You don't want to fill up the screen. It's not a good idea. If there's, even if there's not much information, but your whole screen is full of content, then the first impression people get is, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. So it's good to leave white space. Obviously, some sites have more white space than others. It's not a bad thing. Leave more. You can always add more content. Start at 0 and add slowly, rather than starting at everything and take stuff away. It's harder. Contrast, another way to provide a little bit of hierarchy to your content is adding some contrast. Not everything needs to look the same. It can be different colors. You can have different weights. It can be different styles. Contrast is not necessarily about just color. And it's a good way to add or remove emphasis. it's not just about, visual hierarchy. It's not just about making your H1, 8,000 pixels high because that's the most important piece of content. No, it's also about taking things that are less important, like the author right underneath the thing, and de-emphasizing it. Here, actually, they didn't de-emphasize. Here, they emphasized, but they used color, and they did it consistently. This is Alistapart, which is a great site, by the way. And they use authors in blue all across the site. And it's contrast. And even if you go over to the sidebar, the editor's choice, they still show the content in the same way. Here, they're also doing some typographical contrast. If you notice, the titles are, regular uppercase and lowercase, but the authors are all uppercase. Think about type. You don't have to actually do just, regular case text. You can lowercase things. Even if it's not grammatically correct, it's okay. It'll look pretty. It'll be fine. Nobody will mind, except, I don't know, grammar Nazis, but can live with that. You don't need to use color to add contrast. You can even just make things a little bit dimmer. I have a title here. The date is less important. I'm looking for the content. Maybe once I find the content, I'll look for the date. And if I'm really just looking for the date because somebody told me they posted an article and it was in the last couple of days, then it's still visible enough. I can pick it out if I want to. But when I'm just scanning through the list, if I'm looking to see what here is interesting, then arguably the title is more important than the date. On the We Are Hunted site, they actually use contrast really nicely in several places. Good job. I really like the titles of the songs and the artists. It's kind of hard to see on this projector again. I'm sorry. But they're actually the same type at the same size. They're all capitalized. The only difference is that one is light and one is dark. And they kind of obey that across the board. All of the artists, all of the little, I guess, song boxes or whatever they call these, do it the same way. But it's a good way to say, okay, this is some information and this is some other information, and maybe it's not as important, or maybe whatever. So pulling all these different things together, contrast, contrast and white space, and adding some lines in order to give some structure, and emphasizing and de-emphasizing things. Just taking like a regular, this is like a blog post entry, like the condensed ones before you click through to the full story. This is how, you might do it naively. You'll start out here. You'll say, okay, the title is more important, that's going to be bigger. And then everything else is more or less the same. If you're actually doing the HTML and CSS, you might be starting with a CSS reset that strips away all the styles, and you're adding them as you go. So maybe you just added the style for a thing. And with really, really minor changes, you can give it a lot more structure. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say, good return on investment. You do a little bit and it looks a lot better. All of a sudden there's some structure here. We added some white space. It's a little harder to see on the projector, but the date is grayed out a little bit more. We added a nice dotted line, and the read more became a button with a background. These are all tricks that you can discover by playing, and it's a good thing to steal. Look around at websites that you like. I have a folder on my computer where I keep screenshots of sites that I like, and it's not even like the full site. Like I crop just their nav, or just a blog post, or sometimes I'll even take a crop of just this. I like how they did the read more. And it's my inspiration folder. I go to it, and when I'm like, how am I going to do this or whatever, what stuff did I like? Oh, yeah, that's good. Steal from other people, and you'll get better, and at some point, you'll be original, and you won't be stealing from anybody, and people will be stealing from you. So yeah. A kind of corollary here, another good ace up your sleeve, is designing with a grid. You don't actually need to come up with a unique snowflake of a layout every time you do a site. There's now, and it's fairly popular, there's now these grid systems. It's CSS frameworks that break down your page into a grid. Usually it's 960 pixels wide because that happens to fit nicely into the iPad and the smallest common screen, which is 1024 pixels wide. And then within that, it splits it into columns. And it's 12 columns, it's 16 columns, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you're designing for a grid. And